But my fridge is still in the kitchen, you can't put that anywhere else, so I have to like go through the like zipper, you know, to get into the kitchen.
Here we go. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, July the 14th. Call the meeting to order at 6:30. And before we begin, I would ask that you stand if you're able for an flag. We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides in the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions, and it is with this statement we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. Are there any declarations or disclosures of pecuniary interests? No. Okay. Minutes from our June 23rd meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes as circulated? By Councillor Sample, second by Councillor Pichardi. Questions on those? Favor? Carried. All right, so the first item is our planning public meeting. Tonight's public meeting is under section 34 of the Planning Act, and it's to consider an application for zoning bylaw amendment for the lands known municipally as 114 Main Street West, town of Shelburne. The purpose and effect of the amendment being sought is to add a site-specific provision to permit a dwelling unit on the main floor within a non-residential building, whereas the zoning bylaw requires dwelling units to be located on or above the second story of a building within the C1 zone. I'll ask the clerk for the method of notice for tonight's meeting.
Notice of tonight's public meeting was advertised in the media sources. Notice has been posted on the town website. And notice was provided to property owners within 120 year radius of the subject.
Okay. So we'll have a presentation from our town planner, Steve Weaver, and when Steve's finished, there'll be an opportunity for both members of council and members of the public to ask questions or provide any comments they may have. The clerk will also accept written submissions, and all submissions, whether they're written or oral, given consideration by council prior to the decision. I believe our applicant is
Yes, Mark Hicks is here,
Excellent.
E&H Architects, on behalf of the property owner.
Okay, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Mills and members of council. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to fulfill the Planning Act requirements for a public meeting for this rezoning application. We have a report in your agenda package which gives an overview of the application. We have not made a recommendation other than to receive the report at this time, but wanted to hear council's feedback and any feedback from the public before we come back with a recommendation report. That said, there is a bylaw that's ready for council's consideration if council wants to advance the application tonight, depending on if there's comments or questions. So I have put together a few slides as usual, just to illustrate some of the background of the application. If we could go to the next slide, please. So just to orient ourselves, west of Owen Sound Street and north of Main Street, it's a long, narrow property. Second one in from the lane on the west. And it's, as is typical in the downtown, the building is part of a larger building, shared with 112 on the east. And it's also attached partially to 118 Main Street West on the west. This block, I gave some overview of the history of it in my report. It's part of the original Royal Block, where there was a hotel, and this was part of a hotel many decades ago, late 1800s when that was first established. But we've all known it over the past number of decades as a main floor commercial unit with a couple of apartments above. The image to the top right is a little bit zoomed in. You can see that the parking is located behind the building and that there is some shared access, which I'll provide a bit more detail on as one of the key considerations for this application. And next slide. So this is a street view image from this summer. And you can see the two dashed lines on either side of this property, which is again 114 Main Street West, part of the two-story building along with 112 Main Street West. The door into the law office on the main floor there, the dark colored door, is exclusively for that commercial unit. There's no internal access beyond that to the back of the building, which has its own independent access. The white door just to the right of the property line is within an easement that's shared between the two buildings, and that goes straight up the stairs to the apartments above. I believe I was up there when there was some inquiries a long time ago about renovating that from an original 2 apartments before, and 2 on each side, and that has been done, but it is fairly open up there. So 112 and 114, the 2 properties share that stairwell going up, which has again an instrument to establish that sharing. There is some on-street parking, of course, in front. And if you go to the next slide, just quickly looked at the official plan. It is, of course, within the commercial core area. One thing that we updated in the most recent official plan update in 2015 to 16. There was some interest by property owners in the downtown area at that time to potentially establish a limited number of ground floor units. The discussion with council and the public at that time was that we don't want to diminish from the commercial storefront presence along Main Street, but if more accessible units could be created along the back lanes or oriented to the back of the properties, that would be a good thing for the downtown, as long as, again, it doesn't take away from the commercial priority. And next slide. This just shows the existing zoning. So notwithstanding that policy discussion at the official plan level, in the C1 zone, the regulation is still, the baseline is there's no residential use permissions on the ground floor. It's only second story and above. And there haven't been any exceptions made to that yet. There has been one other application that was filed in 2019 with a similar request for 124 Owen Sound Street, just to the north. That hasn't been approved, but that's something that landowner is still considering. And the next slide. So a few more pictures just to illustrate the conditions behind the building. In the top left, that's the lane, the public lane that the town owns, that runs beside 118 Main Street on the right-hand side and goes back all the way up to the next street to First Ave. And runs behind 124 on Owen Sound Street to the right. And then in the top right, you can see the fairly large parking area behind the buildings. You can't tell, of course, in the photo, but there are multiple property lines that go through that area that kind of carve out the ownership of that parking area. And then the bottom 2 images are the specific parking spaces that are reserved for 114 Main Street, and they are signed as such, and most of the other parking spaces in that area are as well. They're tied to specific buildings. So there are a total of 6 parking spaces for the building. You can kind of see the U-Haul truck in the photo. That's where there's 2 parking spaces right behind the building. And then opposite that, there are 2 more kind of facing into that green grass strip in the middle. And then 2 more on the other side of that. It's gotten a little bit overgrown in that area, but there are some concrete curbs as well that create separation between the parking areas, so you can't drive from one side of the parking area to the other. And next slide. So just to illustrate that from an overhead view, and this is turned so that north is to the right. The first 2 parking spaces right behind the building, they're shown in yellow there, and then behind that, there's that green easement or right of way on the survey that allows for the shared access to those spaces. That shared right of way is also to access spaces 3 and 4. And there's a separate shared right of way on the far right hand of the screen that is used to access spaces 5 and 6. So there are 2 very old rights of way on the property. We've looked into that further, and the applicant has consulted with a surveyor and a lawyer. We've also consulted with the town solicitor about that. It's not uncommon in the downtown area that there's a number of rights of way established, but they're kind of unqualified rights of way. They're a right of passage, but they're not actually a formal easement that we would create today. In other words, there's no responsibility set out of who's required to maintain them. There's no details on what surface they need to be or how wide that surface needs to be or the direction of traffic. And there's no details on which property gets access to which part of this passage. So it's a little bit informal, not the way we would do it today, but it does create some legal means for a property owner to assert their right of moving through that area to get to their property if, say, somebody were to obstruct that access. And as it stands right now, it is unobstructed to the parking spaces. You can get there and back to the lane again without having to move through any unsafe areas. And on this slide too, just obviously the building is on the far left side. So about 2/3 of the length of the property is actually the parking area at the back, and then the front third is the building itself. You can see the little black triangle. That's where there's one access door into the back of the building. And if you go to the next slide, I think we have another. So this is one, before I get to the entrance into the back of the building, this is a parking plan that was provided in the applicant's report. We were a little bit confused by this because it shows space number 6 kind of right behind space number 5 on a different orientation. But I went there firsthand and confirmed there are 2 side-by-side spaces available, 5 and 6, as shown on the D&H site plan. So that's been confirmed. And then you can kind of see the routes of access. The southerly access, just north of spaces 5 and 6, goes all the way over to Owen Sound Street, and you can get all the way through that way. The northerly access is supposed to go to the north of the old post office building, but there's a section of it that is obstructed between Owen Sound Street and the back of that post office building. So spaces 3 and 4 are only accessible from the west, from the laneway on the west. Next slide. The key issue with the apartment on the main floor was really that it was established without any permits or approvals from the town or the county. And it was identified through an inspection that it was existing. So the owner was given the option either to cease occupancy and remove the unit, or to apply for a zoning application to legalize it. In conjunction with that, of course, that then allows an opportunity for review to make sure it complies with building code, fire code, and all the necessary safety requirements. So Dickens and Hicks has prepared not only the drawings that were submitted with the zoning application, but a permit set as well that's ready to be filed for building permit to make sure the necessary renovations are made. So all the life safety measures of fire separations and entrances and all of that are in compliance with the building. It is a relatively small apartment. It's about 25 to 26 square meters, which is a little less than 300 square feet. And there are no bedrooms. But there is a need in the downtown for, rental housing, as we've established before, and ultimately the size of an apartment is regulated by the building. You can see on the plan, the two entrance doors at the back of the building. So there would be one exclusive independent entrance, as there is already, to the apartment unit. And then the one beside that is to a shared laundry room that also services the units on the second floor of the building. Next slide. So here's what I was referring to earlier with the two doors at the back. The right-hand side of the photo is for the residential apartment, and the one on the left is to the shared laundry room. You can see too, there's multiple utility meters on the building for the different apartments and units in the building. And next slide. So the proposed zoning is really to request an exception to two provisions of the bylaw. The first one is a general provision that in the commercial zone, residential dwelling units are not permitted on the main floor, only on the second story and above. So the requested zoning is to establish the C1-4 zone, which would allow an exception to that. Just for one unit, as shown on the floor plan. And then the second is kind of a repeated provision in the C1 zone, specifically section 462, number 11, where it again restricts specifically in the C1 residential units to the second story and above. So that would be an exception as part of this zoning request. The bylaw that we've drafted additionally includes a couple of provisions to ensure that the residential unit is independently accessed from the back and it stays that way, that there's only one unit, and that would be the maximum permitted on the ground floor, and that it would have a maximum size up to 26 square meters, so it can't dominate the main floor area of the building. And also just to require 6 parking spaces for the building as a whole, including one that's dedicated and reserved for this unit. And next slide. So the next steps for this process for the rezoning for the subject property is to consider all comments received, including any comments or questions from council and members of the public. And then we'll review this further with the applicant. There is the matter of the parking and the rights of way that I mentioned that we were working on as recently as late last week to make sure that we understood the legalities of that. And so we didn't want to make a recommendation until we got council's feedback on that as well. And then we would bring forward a recommendation report once we're satisfied all of the issues have been resolved. And there would be then, if it's approved or even refused, there's a notice of decision that goes out and a 20-day appeal period following that. Just for everyone tuning in, we are required to, in a public meeting, identify what the appeal rights are. So during that 20-day appeal period, appeals are limited to the applicant, specified persons under the Act, which is a host of public authorities and utilities, and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We circulated the application, as Jennifer mentioned, and I've noted in my report that we received several responses from different agencies and departments, and none of them indicated any concerns, including the building department and the fire department. We did not receive any public submissions or comments in response to the notice that went out either, so there's been no objections. But of course, we're here tonight again to hear any comments and questions from council and any members of the public. So I'll pause there and welcome any questions, and we'll try our best to try and answer them for you.
Okay. All right, Councilor Donato and Councilor Sherry.
Parking is an issue for me because being on council as long as I've been, we've had several issues with parking in the past in that area. So confirming that the right of ways, and we're not gonna have complaints from other people, as we've had in the past, about vehicles being in wrong spots, everything else. That's the only issue I have. So if you can confirm legally that the parking is somehow solved there so that it's proper. That is the only issue I really have, because I don't wanna see us go back to the past where we've had issues with parking within that, area. We've had a lot of issues in the past, especially with the, parking where, can't remember if it was 4 or 5 or whatever it was that was parked behind the, further building there. There was a lot of problems in that area.
My main comment, that was when I went, to see it firsthand. And then compared it with the plans of the survey that we had. It works as it is today, but as it is on the ground, firstly, it seems like it needs to be cleaned up. But that this lack of maintenance probably has something to do with the fact that there's no legal documents that set out who's even responsible for that. But secondly, the northerly parking spaces where you come in off of the lane to access those, that's not where the actual right of way is. So it's actually on the next property north, which doesn't have any instruments on it or anything surveyed. So if that property owner said, well, look, I don't want anyone crossing my property anymore, and you've got a surveyor to say this is where your property line is, if you put a fence up, then a proper driveway would have to be created south of that. There is room for that, so in other words, there's enough length of this property and the properties next door to meet the bylaw requirements for access into and out of the parking spaces that have properly sized parking spaces that meet the dimensional requirements of the bylaw. It's just kind of like everything got spread out over time and became larger than it needs to be, and because of that kind of weedy area in the middle, it's a little informal and disorganized, if they can say it that way. Landowners coming together to clean that area up, whether the town is part of that as well or not, would be helpful. Unfortunately, with the changes to the legislation, we would have probably required all of that as part of this through a site plan agreement, but we can't require a site plan approval for this type of application anymore because of finding that changes.
The old post office or the laneway that used to come from Owens Sound Street through to that parking area, that owner decided to make it a private lane at one point in time, so you can't go through there. That's my fear, when owners decide that they no longer want to cooperate and decide I'm not having that access, because it's not, like you said, in a legal way and doesn't want any access through there, then we've got a problem. We've got parking all over again, so that's my fear. And we've had that in the past.
So if I can summarize the legal review of that and what we received from the solicitor is it's not that anything is illegal, it's that the nature of passage as it would have been back in the early 1900s, early 1800s would have been for a different purpose back then.
Yeah.
So whether we created a brand new set of easements today with proper terms on maintenance and responsibilities and surfacing and all of that, or whether we go back to those original rights of way created, if anybody obstructs them in a way that, prevents adjoining property owners from accessing their land, the same recourse would be there, which would be you'd have to challenge your neighbor in court to assert your access. But the benefit of a brand new set of easements that spells that out very clearly is that would be more enforceable and defensible on the part of the person trying to assert that access. Under the old rights of way that came way back then, I think it's a little bit less clear as to what exactly those are for, but nonetheless, they're for passage, so you can't just go and obstruct them.
The unfortunate part, Steve, everybody thinks the court is here.
Yeah.
And we are not the court. We can't make those decisions.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Everybody thinks we're the court and they can come here and we'll clear it all up for them, make it all right. And we, like I said, we've gone through that in the past. And that's my only fear. I don't want to see us become the supposed court when we are not the legal. We don't have any legal means either to clear anything up there.
Yeah, and through the mayor to Councilor Bernardo, so the town does not currently have any position legally in terms of those rights of way. And if new easements were created, we would normally have the town, those easements granted in favor of the town because it's all across private property. And that could then inherit the town's responsible somehow for maintenance or other things. The difficulty that could arise in trying to establish formal easements that we would do in today's legal world, is if any property owner doesn't agree to it, then there's no way to enforce it.
Like I said.
But that would be, in a perfect world, if we had formal modern easements in there, that would be a cleaner, more enforceable way to preserve the access.
All I'm saying is that's my main concern.
Are we doing those easements then? Or somebody doing those easements?
And again, through the mayor, I think that this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to just come forward with a recommendation, because in the end, the legal advice on this is it's really a comfort level of staff and council. So that's a long-standing situation. It's physically accessible. It's not in the greatest condition, but that can be an issue whether you have a modern easement or not. It's an older area of town, and that's the way things were done 100 years ago. So it's a little bit of a gray area. It's not a legal black and white. This is not going to work, or this is going to work. It really would have to be tried in court to determine to what extent somebody can assert their access.
Just before we leave that, I go to Councilor Sheridan, informally, who's kind of been maintaining that, right? And I obviously there is a lot of maintenance going on in terms of like debate and stuff, but just snow removal, is that something we have been doing as a town?
Through your worship, the right of ways through there from Owen Sound and the back lane is up to Main.
Okay. I kind of assumed that we had been, but okay.
Yeah, we've been grading them in the past and we did pave them there a couple of years ago too, so there's national.
Yeah.
Yes, the laneways themselves are maintained by us, not the park areas.
And I do get the impression that, including the current landlord, when we first talked to him, the impression, the thought was that the town does own the land back there.
And that's kind of what I'm driving at.
Yeah.
Probably most property owners are under the assumption that the town does own it or at least has.
Yeah.
Easement rights over it, and yeah, I mean, it's working as is, but I think preferred approach would probably tighten up the
Yeah.
property to get everybody on board.
Just a quick question, the size of the apartment is smaller. Second egress, where is that if there's no access through the main street? So those, I mean,
That's a great question, and we didn't get any comments from the building or fire code or fire department about this.
for a legal apartment, there has to be a secondary.
Yeah, Mark, if you have any,
That's not true. We're not in code of. Be a single business. There's fewer than 60 people that exits directly to the outside, so second.
So not even egress or window.
I'm just gonna say a window.
Yeah,
No.
like,
If it was a basement apartment, but because it exits Act 3, so a basement would definitely be a second egress.
yeah, yeah.
A window wouldn't be possible either.
No, that's-
There's no way,
Yeah.
there's one of the
Only-
Walls on both sides.
If the window's beside the door.
Yeah, yeah.
The fire
Yeah.
department
Doesn't work.
would be on top of that. If
Yeah.
it was a,
300 square feet roughly.
be a little just more than that.
Okay.
275.
It's a studio apartment.
Murphy bed for sure.
It's not bad to be there.
Right?
Perfect bed. Any other thoughts or comments? So in terms of trying to formalize that.
It would require a community adjustment approval to do that, and it would require all of the participating or impacted landowners to agree to establish it across the properties, but that is something that we could request is an application to create an easement. And it would be a longer process because this landowner would have to negotiate with their neighbors to try and put all that up.
The unit's not occupied now. Is the unit occupied now?
No, that's my knowledge.
And if they don't agree, then it just stays status quo. It's like the right of way.
Correct. yes, it doesn't undo anything that's there now.
We could always bring the hammer down, expropriate.
Good luck with that.
But let me throw this by you, Steve, because that process wouldn't be entirely in the control of the applicant. Is there a way that we could grant sort of approval, but indicate as a condition of that we request that they at least make that application go through the effort, knowing full well if one of the property owners isn't willing to work with them and it doesn't end up happening.
They still can move forward.
Yeah.
We could include in the, regulations of the file that access to parking spaces shall be maintained, the creation of an easement required to maintain that access. But that we can't stop the residential unit then from being occupied.
Yeah.
And the only, one thing that the landlord wouldn't be able to do is require, because his is in the middle, he can't require the neighbors on either side to.
Yeah.
To-
Yeah.
They might just not agree with that, in which case we're kind of back where we are, which is the right of way. Really,
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is, I'm okay with it generally, and I don't wanna, create undue delays, it's just, I think, for everybody involved, it would be preferable if it kind of tied it up. At the same time.
we could approach or invite all the landowners to meet and determine their willingness. And then report back as part of the next report on that.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That would be more preferable than having somebody come here and think that we're enforcing law and you can decide on it.
Councilor Sample.
Just to piggyback on all that, just because we know snow removal too, like it's gonna be. Like, there's parking already there now, but
Yeah.
when I was back through there in the winter time, it was disaster, like no one was shoveling or doing anything, so. I think some sort of
In the
Yeah.
parking space.
in the parking spaces, yeah, it
Yes.
was just, it was really bad, so I think if we had some sort of organization like. They was saying, it kind of would help, I think, everybody. The same boat, who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
Cause it's just gonna be crazy. You can see it getting out of control now, just spring and the summer, weeds and the grass getting out of there now, winter comes, it's gonna be worse, so.
So we had last year.
But I think.
Yeah, to add to the point, I think going through and bringing all of the neighboring landowners together and making certain that within that gathering, they understand, what others don't understand. It's not town's responsibility, it's not town's property. It's there, and as such, these are some of the expectations. I think that's, one clear item, whether they finally agree, like, there's a money cost to everything, easements and all, the whole process, so I'm not quite certain that you're gonna get full buy-in by all the landowners, because of paying out money. But, at least making certain that they have an understanding and a knowledge of this is what is theirs, and this is what the expectation of that is, including cleaning up the parking spaces. You see the pictures that showed in the summer with the weeds and such. I would certainly hope the current landowner go out and take care of at least their property, knowing that, the other sides need to do the same, but setting the expectation.
Just kind of quickly, I'm assuming that this doesn't really set a precedent for the other buildings to do the same, likely because of ground floor already, taking up space and the lack of parking.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the rest of the downtown would remain the rule that you have to be on the second floor or above. Doesn't stop anyone from coming forward with a similar application, but we review each one on a case by case to make sure it's not parking and meets all the different code requirements.
Okay, perfect, thank you so much.
Kind of clear on where we're at?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, with that then, can I just have a motion to receive the report as information, and then we'll get a further report back. Moved by Councilor Sample, second by Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Steve. Public question periods. Any questions tonight? Anything submitted? Okay. All right, council inquiries.
On Canfield. Roundabout, whatever you wanna call it. I've had complaints from the residents there because of the speed bumps. People are now using that to bypass the speed bumps, especially those with trailers. And motorcycles.
That's faster? That's faster?
It's not faster, but you're not getting, and the people with low cars and mufflers, you're not getting the opportunity of damaging anything, I guess, but they're using it as a bypass to go around the speed bumps. So the question I've had is, can we do something in there, so similar maybe to what we did on Middle Park Lane at the beginning, whatever, just so to discourage that. Dollars, whatever, I don't care, but as long as it stops people from. What the residents want is to stop people from using that as a bypass.
Yeah.
Another set of speed bumps
Right?
just before it.
Speed bumps, people more, yeah.
Another side of it.
And the second thing is, I know I'm a fairly tall person, but I don't like consistently hitting branches when I'm walking. Is there any opportunity to cut some branches on the sidewalk where they're low? So that I don't end up getting hung up some point and choking myself?
I asked Jim the same question this week. He already answered me.
I don't have that.
No, you are okay, but I'm not.
I had to duck as well.
You have to duck every time when you're going underneath. Some of them you really have to duck.
Yeah.
Pretty good to get underneath, especially on Park. The branches are really low there. So can we at least clear them up there, down trees?
Yes, through your worship, we do have our crews out, they have been out the last month doing this, just clearing it up, so then when we pass next winter with the trackless, with cab, we don't hit anything, so that covers town trees or neighboring trees from backyards or whatever, if it's still overhanging the sidewalk, we can still go up with us, we can traverse it properly, so they are making the rounds, but we are still dealing with, ice,
We're still dealing with ice storm stuff?
Yep, we're still dealing with that and assessing trees throughout the town.
I thought we had a time limit.
Residents,
Well,
but
yeah.
the towns.
To pick up next week. Yeah, so pick it up off the side of the road.
So they have been kind of going on a priority basis, but they are working on the sidewalks as well, so.
I don't know, I'm almost ready to take a chainsaw, I'd do some cutting myself. There you go, bye.
There you go.
Bring a lopper with you.
Very big for the law.
He's got the two-handed saw. So in terms of the speed bumps issue, Jim, like if that's a problem's been created by that, can we just move those speed pads back a little further, like on either side of Canfield?
Tree worship, it is possible, it is an elaborate setup, it does take hours to do it because there's measurements that have to be made, so it's a proper width apart for emergency vehicles to traverse it. And that there's proper signage that people don't come rolling up on it too quick to take vehicles, so. But that is possible, we could look at that. If it is moved further south, I would think that it would just be the north side of Canfield that they'll come in instead.
Right.
But,
Just they're using.
Just,
Yeah.
But if they're using the other
You know, if you
ones,
look at coffee,
Then they're
moving
gonna
it like
hit that, they're
this,
gonna hit one going either way.
so they can't bypass it.
yeah,
So they're in the middle of the circle,
Canfield,
you
yeah,
look on
do
the
that.
outside of the half of the horseshoe, then that's gonna, there's no benefit to cutting through.
yeah, which,
They're in the middle of the horse.
Yeah.
Down to the zone.
That's the equivalent on the outside of the horseshoe.
So they'll still.
They have to get over the.
Which because people are gonna have to.
They would have to,
Got it now.
they're not gonna cut through anymore.
Yeah.
No
They're gonna
reason.
hit it, they're gonna try to ignore Derek. Here, they're gonna hit it as they try to, Derek, it's the way it hits them.
they're all gonna go down your street now and then
Yeah.
across.
That would just divert them down.
I might just do that.
So when we did the original traffic calming report, when we looked at the measures for speed reduction, speed bumps are one of the highest priorities that are used. They're very popular, for example, in shopping plots. because they work.
Yeah.
So we consulted with EMS, we consulted with fire that they're not the greatest things in those rounds, but they're tolerable. But they should be, most people can get over them, and they're granted if your car is to the ground. There might be a problem, then I would suggest that maybe we look at alternative routes.
Yeah, what they doing, they're looking at all
I know,
variable routes.
I know, but not to speed. But to not have the impact to your vehicle unless you live on that street, but. I mean, unless council would like us to review the utilization of speed bumps. We had anticipated that would be a continued component of our traffic calming and expanded in 2027 in conjunction with everything else.
I think they're working.
They
No, no,
yeah.
they're working, that's not the issue.
Okay.
The issue is that whatever reason, people see them and they decide to go. But is it not possible to put what we have at the
The
beginning of the bollards at
Yeah.
somewhere in Campville? Because that will definitely, keep people with campers, which are some of the main complaints, they're not gonna be going through there,
Well,
rather than moving to speed bumps.
No, we
Has it become like a major?
So
Some of
we,
the residents, it is, especially on the weekends.
so can we ask that similar to other requests that we have in documentation, we appreciate you giving it collective, that each of these residents formally submit a concern or complaint so that we have the data and the address associated with the incident.
Right.
And then that will demonstrate to us that how many of these are complaints that we can actually do analysis on, and how frequent is this, because again, we could do bollards, but we had a variety of we had a variety of traffic calming measures for a reason, because we wanted to also have the evidence in the test that are associated with each kind of component. So we didn't unify, it's only gonna be speed bumps, only gonna be bollards. We created diversity of approaches to create a diversity of responses, right? And we heard from council of the day, including yourself, I'm not sure if there's anything, but that you believe that speed bumps were a very effective tool, and we keep hearing anecdotally from the community that people want speed bumps.
actually, that's
Yeah,
fine.
and we were calling them more speed humps because ours are more Christian.
Yeah.
And they're not as so they actually have some flexibility, so that's why I'm surprised that even some vehicles, they shouldn't have any issues with them. But, so it would be important for us to have that down.
Okay, I'll talk to the residents when I see them.
Okay, thank
I tell them to put the
you. It would be
complaint
very, it would
in,
be very helpful, just even send an email.
just send the emails will be fine.
Well, we prefer the data in terms of just filing, we can call it a complaint or just some input, so that we can have all that data.
I'll talk to them best I can. But I'm the one complaining about the trees, so.
Okay.
You're not gonna get it.
Get your complaint in.
Exactly, right?
Councilor Wagner.
Yes, so just to piggyback off that, I've had a couple of residents over with regards to Cook Crescent and Johnson Drive who are also concerned with the speeding. They so far have conveyed that they are happy about speed cameras, but they're sort of upset that there doesn't seem to be anything going out over their way. So I wasn't sure if we had anything in the budget for 2026 for more speed enforcement with regards to bumps or bollards or whatnot. But if we do, if there's a possibility, I guess, to maybe have a look at Cook Crescent and Johnson Drive, because they are saying they're rounding those corners pretty darn quickly, and there's a lot of children over in that area as well now. So that's kind of the concern. So I thought I would bring that up and maybe just see what we could maybe do with that side of town.
Through your worship, we did have our speed signs up there for June.
Okay.
So we did register a total number of vehicles of 1,233. The average speed was 18, the 85th percentile was 27 kilometers an hour. We only had one person traveling 51 to 55. The rest were well under that, and 40 and under the speed limit. But it could be the location itself.
Okay.
We know where the person is, we can strap a sign to one of the streetlights and check that out,
Okay.
the data off that. But right now, we're not seeing any speed issues at
Yeah.
all, so we wouldn't be looking at
Okay,
with that kind of assessment.
Yep.
Just what we see so far, we wouldn't be looking at any kind of measures out there,
I see,
not seeing
okay.
any issues.
I'll get them to send in a complaint,
Yep.
right, through the form, so that way you have at least their address, so maybe we can monitor that specific area, but I mean, if it's, the data is not lying, so I know sometimes people think somebody's going faster than what they actually are, so it could be misinterpreted that way as well, when they're kind of coming around the corner, you think they're doing 50 or 60, but they're really not. So it could be that as well, so, okay, thank you for that information.
No problem.
Councillor Sample and Councillor Sherry.
To piggyback on that, it's
Yeah,
very, very busy with parked cars in the street there, so I don't know how anybody's getting up to any speed.
I was wondering it myself.
It is, it's a very dangerous area.
it is,
So I was up there the other day and it's, the one side is like solid cars
Yeah,
right up
all the
one
way
side, and then you go to the other side of Cook, it's the same way.
that is
It's
true.
solid cars, those, it's like one lane. So I don't know how anybody's getting any speed in that area.
That's
I am
true.
sure it's, maybe this.
Yeah, it might be deceiving, yeah,
So I will, now, the tall grass or the weeds or whatever happens in front of the, so what we West 89 now, that development, so they have a fence line there, who's responsible for like the ditch and up to the fence line and the to the side of the road?
Through your worship, on, the Highland Village.
Yeah, that's one, and then you go down to, going out of town, the north on Old Sound or 10, whatever you wanna call it, right hand side, it's the same way, people along the fence. They're trimming the fence about this far, like enough for a lawnmower, but nobody else is doing up to the ditch, and everything is climbing now, and it just looks like crap, that's all, so I just don't know who's responsible for that, if it's us or if it's the county, or if it's.
Yeah, through your worship, our equipment, and I believe our bush mower for that, that's flexible that came over, is still out of commission, so we've been renting one since last year. That's something that we go through and do a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be in more of a natural state, similar to the swim ponds, where I know residents think it's going to be manicured, groomed, and somebody's gonna show up every weekend.
Well, I wouldn't expect it to be manicured or groomed, but I should, like, if it gets to be 5 or 6 feet tall, I would expect maybe 3 feet of it to be cut down, you know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
just to give it an appearance coming into town, because it does look like you're driving into, excuse my French, but a hillbilly network, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
The high grasses and everything, I'm not saying do it, but I'm just saying, I don't know who's responsible.
Dan, which side of Highway 10 are you talking about?
If you're going north, it'll be the right side. So the back side of my subdivision of
Oh, right,
the
yeah.
north side.
So within our right of way.
Yeah.
If it's within our right of way, it's our responsibility. If it's outside of our right of way, then it's the highway's responsibility.
Well, I just know that when you go down the back roads, they're trimming all the sides down to keep it back away from it and everything, so. You can see some of the property owners will cut on the back side of the fence, just to give it a neater appearance, but then you get closer into the ditch, it just all wrong, so.
Yeah, through your worship, again, we'd just be doing it off the roadside again, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be going down through the ditch and then back up the back part, which is 20 or 30 extra feet, and kind of trimming all of that. Just the portion off the road, but it's within the part, that's the area.
Just traveling up that way the last few days, a few weeks now, and I noticed it's just looks pretty shabby, but. So,
It's kind of like that property that's for sale now too, so
Yeah.
it's not bad.
yes.
I'm assuming that's with the responsibility of the current owner? I guess, I don't know, it looks a little derelict over there, yeah, derelict over there as well, so. But
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sherry.
Oh, thanks. Just a quick inquiry about smoking in parks, smoking on the trails. That seems to be there's a lack of signage. And just wondering if we can dig up some signs. I know it's concerns around splash pad. Canada was a bit of a concern in Greenwood. And then Fridays in the park. we've got some smoking issues there, so I'm just wondering if there is signage available at it, can we post it? Is that a Jim question?
My apologies, I missed the first.
I'm sorry.
For signage,
No smoking signage in parks, on the trails.
yes, we should have signage at the shop for that, and they should be out. They could have been missed or analyzed, just removed, so I'll check with staff on that to make sure.
Okay, great, thanks.
Wondering even social media blast.
We'll share that with social media. Reminding people that there's no smoking parks and on the trip.
I'm sure some people may just not
No,
Yeah.
Okay, sure, I have one further. The sign we put up for the cameras on. It's difficult to see, and I know people don't seem to notice that it's there. It's not the most visible sign, and I don't want people thinking they are doing that on purpose, so that.
It's pretty plain, it's right there.
So,
Why
I don't know anything like it, so I mean, I'm not sure other than trimming trees, branches around that.
I
Or
don't
moving
know.
the sign that's coming soon. I would let us explore what's the best option, if we certainly thought it was visible.
Yeah, it just seems to get lost with all the signage that's in that area there, and people aren't paying, may not be paying attention. They'll pay attention. But then they'll say, where was the sign?
For your worship, there is specific spots that the signs have to be put into. Global comes out and inspects those areas just to make sure that the sign is gonna be in the same catchment area as the camera is gonna catch down the road. And when that sign gets switched out to camera use, it'll be captured within the photo of whoever's speeding, along with the community safety zone sign in there as well.
Right.
Yeah, so I think as long as we've done it properly. We're
I'm
good.
assuming Jeff will be paying.
They'll be saying lots of things.
All right, any further inquiries before we move on? No, okay, so the first of two reports tonight is our second quarter financial report. Gary?
Thank you, and through the mayor, this is just the quarterly report for the period of April 1st to 30th. I have updated some of the costs related to the ice storm and the excessive snowfall that we received this year, just so the council is aware of our over budget on both those line items. More significantly than other years, and we are looking at applying for a grant for the ice storm costs. And as Jim mentioned, we are still working at cleaning up some of the trees that were less immediate as far as danger goes, but they have been compromised and need to come down before the winter. So we have spent, when I wrote this report, it was 88,000. We're at 91,000 now, and we will have more. So we will apply for the storm assistance grant. Now, what we don't know though is how many other municipalities apply as well.
Yeah.
If we had that much, costs, imagine how much other municipalities would have had as well. So I'm not just keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But there's no promise there. And then I did mention the winter control costs. We budgeted 137,000, and to date we're at 230,000, of which 167,000 was strictly snow. That was just contracting to come take the snow away. So one thing that we do need council motion for is the WSIB reconciliation. We have received $52,575. Staff are recommending that in the HR reserve. It was not expected, an expected grant. It's based on whether we've had claims over the last couple of years, and our premiums are a little bit higher than what we would normally be paying. Part of that reason was because we had our own police force. But once that 7-year forgiveness is passed, our premium rate should drop. And then we won't see these refunds, it's reconciliation refunds that they're seeing right now. So staff are recommending that found money, put it in reserve. We don't know what it used for, but it's just there.
We just every day.
So, and then, the report also includes the accounts as always and the tenders and RFPs that have been awarded for that period. Of which council is aware of the one because it was the Little Park. And we had to come back and do a report to council for that one. And we also awarded the playground equipment. There was one RFP that was issued that was not awarded because it went over budget, and that was the replacement air unit for the town hall. So we will revisit that and figure out what to do in the 2026 budget.
All right, any questions for Terry on that? All right, can I have a motion then to receive the report and to direct the amount of $52,575.76 be placed into human resources reserve to be utilized to offset potential costs associated with future HR related matters. Moved by Deputy Mayor Hall, seconded by Councilor Sherry. All in favor? Carried. All right, and the only other item was a letter from Taylor Wallace looking for use of the Tasha Patterson Park for the Terry Fox Run on September 14th. And I guess the amount of that fee waiving would amount to $99.78. So we want to make a motion to approve that. Councilor Wagner. Sample. Favor? Carried. Okay. Any notices of motion? Communication. They're jumping at anybody, Councilor Bernardo.
I got two. The minutes from the Shelburne Public Library Board, I saw there's an MOU in there, and I also saw the question whether they're, because of the voting from outside members, whether they're a unity library board. I don't want to see us fit into what we had in the past with two other boards. And I'm really concerned with the library board, especially with an MOU. So I'm hoping, I'm gathering that MOU was created by the board or by the library itself. It hasn't come to town hall.
Through the mayor, town was requested to clarify the responsibilities for all capital with the building. We reviewed the creation of a new MOU, which we have drafted, and we've had legal review. We have not yet provided that to the library as draft consideration for staff. At the same time, however, there were questions about the understanding of the board composition. And unlike other libraries where there's a bylaw, for example, that gives the authority for those positions and the representation, particularly where there's other municipalities to be represented. Exactly that, there's an authority. So that has a bearing on the oversight of an MOU and how it's actually administered and who's actually authorized to be dealing with those issues. Because the question is, there seems to be the request that exclusively all costs associated with the building, which we do own, are the responsibility of the town of Shelburne. So through this process, we did identify that there is a 1991 MOU. And in that, it specifically specifies that all costs and capital are the responsibility of the library. So this is the process we're sort of in at the moment. And so we have created a draft, which we would present to them first to discuss, which would ultimately have to come back to council for approval because it would shift some costs to us. And there would have to be a capital schedule to understand. At the same time, however, though, it would reinforce the authority of council to make that decision and fund the library budget. So hopefully that answers it. There should be an MOU. It is a fairly common approach in many municipalities But it's understanding the complexities and the operationalization of some of the current functions that are sort of ambiguous. So there's costs that Will, as our colleague staff member, has been dealing with and trying to resolve, but where the MOU should be helpful. But until a new MOU is in place, the 1991 MOU, which has never been rescinded as far as we know, isn't. And we're trying, and the library staff have indicated that they think that they have a person who knows the history. So I made the comment just today that if there is a document or a bylaw that grants the authority from the town of Shelburne through a bylaw to have representation on this board, which does similarly look on the surface like a union library, which is our original comment back, without being a union library. There was a year where I think Mulmer left the board and came back. Well, in that case, there should have been the automated requirement that any bylaw or oversight of the authority would have to have been amended to remove Mulmer from being on the board, and then a process to reinstate them. This can't be that informal. So that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of before we give an MOU that has other representatives from other municipalities being able to, I guess, make significant decisions affecting an MOU which affects Shelburne. So that's really what we're trying to resolve. The MOU is quite easy. It comes up on a property facility composition. This is what the town of Shelburne is responsible for. This is how it's administered. This is how it functions, and this is the responsibility of the library, which in essence is a tenant of the building. So it's done. It's just we want to resolve this other issue. If we can't, we'll try to move it forward. But my opinion that it shouldn't move forward in the absence of that being clarified.
Mulmer left. The years before I got on council, I was on the library board. And Mulmer left at that period of time on the budget. Where they wanted the same budget as we had to create more. And budget on toss, and we weren't too high as far as they were concerned, so they left the library board at that point. So that would be 1996 to 99, somewhere in there, they left.
And then
I can't give you any,
instance after that.
yeah, I can't give you any history being on that, before that, because.
So we know, I think when we looked at, and we're gonna try to do the deepest dive we can on this on our own if we have to. We know that, for example, Grand Valley, we know that the town of Grand Valley has a bylaw where it lists the other municipalities who bylaw that have the authority to be on that board and how their representation is structured. That's what we're really trying to get to the bottom of, in terms of just clarifying this structure, this formalization, this authority, and how that affects any future MOU. And I don't think that's an unfair question, because like we said, on the surface, it does appear to be functioning almost similar to a union library. But without the capital costs being supported, which is generally one of the functions of a union library. So I'm sure we'll clean this up. It's just going through the record and trying to find something we do that it's probably archived.
I don't agree.
Like, I guess the short answer is it's definitely on staff with our.
Yeah. Asking
They'll-
for at least
There'll be something back. For us at some point, so.
And second one is number 4, I would like to make a motion support for the town of Bradford's advocacy for increased income support thresholds for community independence. If somebody was next.
Sounds like I was gonna bring up number 4 as well.
There we go. Right, so moved by Donato, seconded by Wagner. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Pretty self-explanatory if you read it.
Yeah.
That was it for me.
Okay, anybody else?
Nope, that's pretty
Stole your
clear.
thunder.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, it's good, that's awesome.
If there's nothing else, then can I just get a motion to receive the remaining items as issued? Sample, seconded by Shardy, all in favor? Carries. And motion for Bernie bylaw. Not over, right now.
I'll sneak it in before.
All in favor? And a motion to adjourn. I've been auto effective by Sam. All of this.
Find out what I'm trying.
Yeah.